The Manhattan Project was a government project to design and make an atomic bomb and hopefully end World War II. I'll talk about the reasons the project started, the processes of designing and making the bomb, major events during the project, and the research done before the project that made it possible. It all began when an English physicist, John Joseph Thomson, discovered the electron in 1897. Around the same time, discoveries were made about the mysterious radioactivity. During 1896, a physicist from France, Antonio Becquerel, found the three basic forms of radioactivity, which were soon named alpha, beta, and gamma by Ernest Rutherford. At the same time, a team of husband and wife, Marie and Pierre Curie, worked in Paris on the radiation emissions of thorium and uranium. They soon announced the discovery of radium and polonium, and that beta particles had a negative charge, which led to Becquerel discovering that beta particles and electrons were the same thing. Sometime between 1900 and 1910, Rutherford took all of this information and put it together. During 1903, he suggested that atoms breaking down was the cause for radiation. In 1919, Rutherford discovered the second base atomic particle, the proton. In the 1910s, scientists who had studied the atom believed it could make an astounding amount of energy. In 1932, James Chadwick, a friend of Rutherford, discovered the final base atomic particle, the neutron. With the final particle discovered, it answered many questions in the scientific community, and in 1932, an Irishman, E.T.S. Walton, and an Englishman, J.D. Cockcroft, became the first people to split an atom. December 7th, 1941. World War II had been going on for nearly a year and a half, and America had mostly stayed out of it, until now. Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, just before 8 a.m. local time. Their aircraft destroyed or badly damaged 18 ships, 300 planes, and killed or badly injured over 2,000 men. Americans were in shock and outraged, which led to President Roosevelt deciding to join the war and taking the first steps towards the atomic bomb. On October 11, 1939, President Roosevelt met with an old friend and advisor, Alexander Saches, to talk about a letter written to him by Albert Einstein during August. Einstein had written the letter to warn the president that recent research on fission chain reactions that used uranium made it possible that such a chain reaction could produce an extremely large amount of power, and that by harnessing this extreme power, it would be all too powerful to build an incredibly powerful bomb that could easily destroy an entire city all on its own. Einstein thought that the German government was supporting and investing in this research with great enthusiasm, and said that America should follow suit. Saches read the letter and briefed the president on the main points in Einstein's letter. At first, the president was not completely committed to the idea and was worried about finding the necessary fundings for the project. However, after a second meeting over breakfast, he was convinced that atomic energy would be very useful. Einstein wrote his letter with the help of a Hungarian physicist, Leo Szilard, one of the many European scientists who fled to the USA to escape Hitler and his Nazis in the 1930s. Leo was a heavy supporter for a program to research and develop these bombs. He and other scientist refugees saw it as their responsibility to say how German scientists could very possibly beat the Allies to such a weapon, and that Hitler would be more than willing to use it. Sadly, since Roosevelt was busy with things going on in Europe, it took him over 2 months to meet with Saches after getting the letter. Roosevelt wrote back to Einstein and informed him that he would start a project to research uranium, on the basis that he simply could not let such a weapon fall into the hands of Adolf Hitler. Other scientists in the country had already heard rumors of a fission chain reaction being possible, and started to conduct their own research. American and British scientists quickly grasped the concept and made small breakthroughs often, since they would form their own small committees or groups and do things as a team. Many American and British scientists were excited about their breakthroughs and wanted to share them with the country. But immigrant physicists who had fled their home countries because of Nazi Germany were extremely cautious about this and put most of their efforts into keeping the others' research a secret and getting governmental support for further research. Most scientists freely shared their information with each other, but thankfully, a group of leading scientists, including Leo Szilard, convinced most in the British and American scientific community to not publish any of their research to the public, and possibly aiding in German research. Covering it up largely collapsed, though, when a French physicist, Frédéric Joliot-Curie, refused not to publish his research, which encouraged others to do likewise. This continued to happen until late 1940, where scientists finally got the government's interest and support. With the government taking part in the research and development, the project had started, with the government hiring miners, workers, and scientists, and building sites. The scientists were really the only non-government officials who knew what this was all about, since it was a secret project. Around a year later, with all the mines and other necessary buildings built, they still had a lot of the research on fission chain reactions to do, not to mention designing the actual bomb. This bomb research and development lab that they needed so badly would be at Los Alamos, just north of New Mexico in the mountains. With the codename Project Y, the site's history started in spring of 1942, when James Conant, a physicist, suggested to Vannevar Bush, head of research and development, that the Army and the research and development make a team to start research and to build the actual bomb. He agreed, and sent the request to higher-ups, who then authorized it. Months later, Leslie Grooves, the general in charge of the project, had made a committee to study the possible uses for the bomb. Meanwhile, most scientists who worked on the bomb design part of the project began to think that research needed to be organized better. A lead physicist, Robert Oppenheimer, along with other scientists, suggested to Grooves that they make a sort of main hub where work could be done up to protocol, as well as a place that would let scientists freely suggest ideas. The place they had settled on was an odd one, a boys' school that was extremely secluded in the mountains. Oppenheimer was chosen by Grooves as head of this new site. Oppenheimer, who originally thought he wasn't cut out for the job, was surprised with how well he was able to convince scientists to join at Los Alamos. There were many problems that the scientists at Los Alamos faced. However, after many experiments for what metal can be used, what the best mass for the metal was, what the critical mass was, and many others, on 1944, Los Alamos was able to begin development of the bomb, which also had its fair share of problems, such as lack of communication with Oak Ridge and the district engineer Kenneth Dean Nichols, who was in charge of Oak Ridge, the site that was the main plutonium plant and uranium purification plant, and the same problem with Hanford, their plutonium supplier, as well as not enough people, mostly physicists. These problems were solved when Grooves, who wasn't going to let such things be the delay for such a powerful weapon, made several changes in 1944 to prevent this from happening. During February in 1945, the gun-type bomb was solidified, and the implosion style was approved for a test on July 4th. By July 4th, 1945, the implosion-style design was tested at the Trinity site, with the people of the project already convinced that the gun style would work, and sent it on its way around a month before the implosion's test. They knew they had succeeded at building a powerful weapon, and they had made the world's first atomic bombs. However, what these weapons of mass destruction were to be used for, if used at all, was still to be decided. Germany had already surrendered on May 8th, and the Allied leaders decided to meet in Potsdam, Germany. The president decided to at least ask the other leaders if they were against using the bombs, but they had no such opinions. After meeting with his advisors, the president decided to use the bombs as soon as they were ready. The untested uranium bomb, named Little Boy, dropped on Hiroshima on August 6th, killing around 80,000 people, with the plutonium bomb, Fat Man, hitting its target of Nagasaki 3 days later, only killing around half as many people as Little Boy, at around 4,000. Japan surrendered on the 14th of August, and the war was over. However, there is much debate over whether it was the bombs that made the Japanese surrender. Either way, the Manhattan Project, whether it ended the war or not, played an important part in history, and without it and the scientists who took part in it, we would not be where we are today.